Meet the virus hunters, a team of Thai scientists who identify emerging diseases. But since January, they've had one mission: to help the government detect the new coronavirus.
Dry winters of Beijing, the gate to the Forbidden City covered in snow. A few people have come out to take in the spectacle, but getting inside is out of the question. Just like almost all public facilities, Beijing's most famous historic site remains closed.
Coronavirus continues to spread. Past words from Bill Gates are becoming increasingly relevant. Now, back in 2019, the billionaire warned that the world was not ready for a pandemic and that we should be approaching the threat just like war. Now, although not classified a pandemic, nations seem ready to listen.
Includes doing simulations, war games, and preparedness exercises so that we can better understand how diseases will spread and how to deal with things like quarantine and communications to minimize panic.
A weapon of war that most countries believe should no longer be used and cannot be justified morally. Anti-personnel landmines maim and kill thousands of innocent people each year, often in places where fighting ended decades ago. And while most of the world has banned them, the U.S. says it's planning to use them again after more than 30 years.
Landmines are one of very many other important tools that our commanders need to have available to them on the battlefield to shape the battlefield and to protect our forces.
With the change in policy, U.S. forces will be able to use anti-personnel mines in future conflicts in certain circumstances. Mines the Pentagon says will be able to self-destruct or self-deactivate without threatening civilians. Unlike the millions of mines that dot the Korean demilitarized zone, the Obama administration committed the U.S. to destroy landmine stockpiles, except those intended to defend South Korea.
China's military might on show at a parade last year, with some weapons seen for the first time. In October, analysts said China's technological advances were almost unprecedented. And new research is revealing just how many of these weapons are being produced by Beijing, in a dramatic shift from a decade ago, when it had to buy most of its munitions.
I think it's very important information for us and the world, because we know that, of course, China used to rely on importing weapons from Russia, but we see now that it can almost completely build and produce its weapons for its own military. And we also see that the industry is at a point where other countries are demanding its weapons.
What's your reaction to the peace plan? Is this a realistic proposal at all?
No, I don't think so. And I think, as your report brought out, this is more about the domestic situation of the two principals there, Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu, both of whom are looking for ways to shore up their domestic support. Diplomacy 101 tells you that if you want to get any kind of parties on side, this is precisely what the U.S. negotiators here have not done. And they've steamed ahead without any buy-in whatever from the Palestinians from day one when they started this process 2 or 3 years ago.
They probably won't want it initially, but I think in the end they will. I think in the end they're going to want it. It's very good for them. In fact, it's overly good to them. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Palestinians is already rejecting President Trump's Middle East peace plan, which he plans to roll out at noon Eastern time today, along with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think we're relatively close, but we have to get other people to agree with it also. I will say many of the Arab nations have agreed to it. They like it.
Netanyahu thanked Trump, saying he is the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House.
First, that the deal of the century is the opportunity of the century, and we're not going to pass it by.
For their part, Palestinian leaders would likely agree that Trump is the greatest friend to Israel and have rejected the deal as dead on arrival.
This deal, which is not based on international legality and international law, which also gives Israel all it wants at the expense of the national rights of the Palestinian people that embodied in an independent sovereign state with Jerusalem as its capital and the right of its refugees for return, does not make base for a quick solution. It comes from a party that has lost its credibility to be an honest broker in a serious and genuine political process.
Asked asked about how Palestinians feel about the deal, Trump said this.
We think we will ultimately have the support of the Palestinians, but we're going to see. And if we do, it'll be a tremendous tribute to everybody. And if we don't, life goes on.
The Palestinian Authority has not had any substantive dealings with the Trump administration since it recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel in December 2017.
The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says China's now the second biggest arms manufacturer in the world, behind the US and with Russia in third place.
There have been a number of shifts in military policy within China. First off, they've reduced over that period almost 600,000 troops, but they put more money into modernizing the army. The 2 aircraft carriers are in production, one they had bought. Those are big ticket items.
The size of China's industry has been largely a mystery, with Beijing keeping reliable data secret. But the Institute has now been able to look into 4 major Chinese companies and says 3 of them would be in the top 10 global arms producers.
They've already cut the results waiting time down from almost 2 days to just 3 hours.
The early detection and the fast reporting the result not just good only for the patient, it's good also good for the government. So if it is positive, they can find the other contacts to not make the disease spread.
1,500 specimens have already been analysed here. That includes repeat screening of patients and any of their possible contacts. First, the virus is killed and the DNA is extracted. That's then separated into containers so it can be tested to prove if it's coronavirus or not.
The reason we're not wearing full biohazard suits in this room, but the scientists next door are, is for one simple reason, and that's because the virus in that room is live. Everything that comes into here is dead. And because coronavirus isn't transferred through the air as an aerosol, it's transferred through droplets, this room has been deemed safe.
Dr. Supaporn identified the first case of coronavirus in Thailand. Her lab is one of only 2 in the country testing positive samples, while others screen for potential sufferers.
Converted to an enormous makeshift hospital, part of Wuhan's response to the flood of new infections. Chinese state television broadcast footage of recently completed hospitals with multitudes of doctors taking care of few patients. But secretly recorded videos from hospitals paint a very different picture. Body bags containing the dead lying close to patients, even in waiting areas. This citizen journalist visited 4 hospitals in Wuhan.
People are not being informed about the real situation. State TV doesn't go where it hurts, but I think this needs to be seen.
The journalist found more body bags outside one hospital. Inside, he saw dying patients together in one room. He posted his videos online. Officials had him arrested, then released him after a public outcry. But in China, his online videos have been deleted.
We begin this hour with the race towards 5G technology. Now, there's a new court case that could be the latest sign of the ongoing tension between the United States and a specific company, Huawei. Now, the Chinese telecom giant is taking legal action against United States company Verizon over patent
infringement. As the UK is just days away from Brexit, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Parliament have already made a crucial decision that may impact their relationship with the US. They've decided to make a deal with Huawei and let the Chinese tech giant play a limited role, they say, in their 5G rollout.
The way forward for us, clearly, is to have a system that delivers for people in this country the kind of consumer benefits that they want through 5G technology or whatever, but does not in any way compromise our critical national infrastructure, our security, or jeopardize our ability to work together with other intelligence powers around the world. So the Five Eyes security relationships we have, we've got to keep them strong and safe.
Now, the U.S. has already alluded to Huawei. A deal would cause a rift between the U.K. and the U.S., especially in the way of national security alliances. So veiled, not so veiled threats maybe from the U.S., not so veiled. Yeah. Today, the U.K. has decided they're going to do it. Trump officials say this will be consequential.
Right.
Decode that for us.
Well, I think they're intentionally not being specific about what it is because they don't know what it's going to be. Look, the original threat that kind of came to Great Britain over this was if you do this, you can't participate in the Five Eyes. Five Eyes being the intelligence sharing between the United States, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. Those are the 5 countries involved. And so essentially what the US had said was, hey, we can't trust intelligence going back and forth between these countries because it'll be compromised because Huawei will have access to this and they'll essentially leak everything to the Chinese government. But that didn't work, right? So the UK still went ahead and moved forward. Now, is the US actually going to cut the UK out of intelligence sharing? No, because obviously the US needs UK intelligence sharing. We need that relationship. And again, listen, you and I have talked about this so many times.
Yes.
There is no evidence. There is no proof that there is any backdoor into Huawei technology, number one. But number two, 5G technology, there's really no evidence that there's any kind of a backdoor into the 5G technology.
There's probably other kinds of danger from 5G that's not.
That would be much more serious and much more harmful, right? And again, look, Boris Johnson had said, if you're going to make these claims about Huawei, then you gotta come with some kind of evidence of this. You can't just make these claims about them with no proof. And that's what Huawei has been saying to the United States. Huawei's been saying this for a long time. You know, give some evidence. And one thing that you and I have talked about a lot is that by the United States doing this, they have only empowered and strengthened Huawei along the way.